Are names becoming more unique? Y'all know I make these videos to answer the questions that I have about life. I start thinking about a question that I have, I become unreasonably obsessed with answering that question, and then I make these videos to answer that question. Well, what happened was I met multiple people who had extremely unique names or spellings, and I started wondering, are uncommon names actually becoming more popular? First, I'm going to tell you about the research that I found directly answering this question. Are unique names becoming more popular? And then I'm just going to tell you about some random odds and ends of research that I found interesting as I was exploring this question. First, let's just tackle the question, are names becoming more unique? And the answer is yes, absolutely. The broad trend over the past 100 to 150 years in the United States is names are definitely becoming more unique. If you look at US data from 1880 to 1919, during that era, more common names decreased. So people were starting to name their kids more unique names. Then from 1920 to 1949, more common names increased slightly. So that was a period that was a little bit more conservative. The US was going through a lot of turmoil. It was the Great Depression, and a lot of people didn't really feel like going out on a limb and doing something different. But I will say it was only a slight change. From 1950 to 2007, that has generally been a period in which common names have decreased and unique names have increased. But that trend really accelerated in the 1990s. From the 1990s to today, this is when more unique names really took off. So, the overall trend of the past 150 years has been an increase in unique names in the United States. This trend holds true even when you control for immigration rates. So, this is not a story about immigrants coming into the United States with names that are less familiar. Instead, this is people who are native born who are choosing more unique names. Lots of researchers have tackled the question of why names are becoming more unique. Generally, researchers believe that the biggest factor causing more unique names is the rise of individualism. Individualism is when society is favoring individuals over the collective. So, for example, playing individual sports that you can do by yourself, or being more interested in crafts and activities that you can do by yourself, or favoring the individual's right over the collective's rights. All of these are parts of rising individualism in the United States, and naming trends are part of that too. People want to be different than other people. They want to be unique. They don't want to be like everybody else. They don't want to fit into the collective necessarily. During this period of time, there's also been a rise in unisex names, which makes sense as gender norms are having less of a stranglehold on society as they had in the 1800s. Unisex names are becoming more and more common. Interestingly, even though both men and women's names have grown more unique over time, women's names are even more likely to be unique than men's names are. For example, currently, women have about 11 unique names per 1,000 names, and men only have about 8 unique names out of 1,000 names. I also found that name uniqueness is rising around the world. I was able to find research from Japan and other research from China showing that other parts of the world are experiencing this trend as well. And all of these researchers claim that it's because of rising individualism globally. I found one interesting paper that claimed that unique names are more common among people living on kind of a frontier. For example, in the western United States, unique names are more common than on the eastern United States. And of course, the West was the frontier in the US for a long time. They found that the same pattern was true in Canada. In Canada's frontiers, there are a lot more unique names. So it does seem like there's something about thinking about yourself as someone who forges a new path that encourages people to choose unique names for their children. Now let's look at some of the research odds and ends I found about unique names as I was looking for this information. I found that names are more popular if their component parts were more popular in previous years. For example, in any given year, you can predict how popular the name Karen is going to be by looking at other names that sound somewhat similar. For example, Carl and Katie have the same beginning sound, and they actually predict how popular Karen is going to be. You can also look at names that have the same ending sound, like Darren or Warren, which have the same end sound as Karen. Those predict how popular Karen will be. Researchers found that this is even true of the names of hurricanes. For example, after Hurricane Katrina, even though a lot of people didn't want to name their kid Katrina because it was such a traumatic event, names that started with the letter K became 9% more popular. Although, after a certain point, a name or sound pattern becomes oversaturated, overpopular, and people don't want it anymore and start rejecting it. Another piece of research found that people with more common names are more likely to be hired than people with unique names. People with common names are not only more likely to be hired, they're also assumed to be better liked, they're assumed to be more attractive, and other people assume that they have higher status. In fact, in beauty contests, the contestants who had the most common names get the most votes. Now, this research was from 2008, so maybe as unique names become more and more common, this pattern will change. I found another line of research that was asking how names become popular. Researchers found the impact of celebrities and media, public figures, and culture. For example, they found that babies born 4 years after a president's first election are much more likely to be named after that president than the babies who were born 4 years before that president's election. For example, the name Woodrow was 40 times more popular after Woodrow Wilson became president. The name Barack was 25 times more popular after Barack Obama became president. They found the same effect with Disney protagonists. For example, the name Belle was 9 times more popular after Beauty and the Beast premiered in 1991. I also found this really interesting body of literature about names and gender. Have you ever heard a new name, a name that's new to you, and yet you were pretty easily able to guess whether that name was associated with a man or a woman? That's because names follow patterns associated with gender. Women's names have 25% more vowels on average than men's names. Men's names have 8% more consonants on average than women's names. Women's names end in a vowel 37% of the time. Men's names only end in a vowel 8% of the time. When names end in an A, 97% of the time they're a woman's name. When a name ends with an E, 94% of the time they're a woman's name. If a name ends with an F, 99% of the time they're a man's name. And if a name ends in a K, 95% of the time it's a man's name. Women's names have more syllables on average. Just one last weird factoid I found when I was looking at information about how people name their kids. I also found some information about the names of objects. While we've already seen that unique names are not valued among other people, it is not true of objects. People value objects more if they're given a more unique name. Unique names make a product more desirable. Houses that are on a street with a unique name sell for 1.6% more money than the same house on a street without a unique name. So, in general, society values unique names in objects and not in people. So, to summarize, are names becoming more unique? Yeah, and it's because of rising individualism.